My name is Shane, and on behalf of Laura, our in-flight manager, and the entire crew, a very warm welcome on board this British Airways flight to London Heathrow.
From the latest on Caribbean cruises to kosher safaris, pilgrimages to Jewish Eastern Europe, and award-winning wines and international cuisine in sun-drenched Tel Aviv. Sit back and enjoy the trip with the travel edition of the Jerusalem Post podcast.
Hello, David.
Hello and shalom, Mark.
Shalom, David. I'm going home.
What does home mean? And now we get into a whole controversial area.
Gosh, yes. Where is my home? Well, I'm a dual citizen, and one of my homes is in...
You are a jewel in the crown. You're a jewel in the crown, Mark.
A Jew where?
Oh, dearie me. Yes.
Sorry, it's a bit noisy because I'm on a plane.
We are recording this at 30,000... They don't do 36,000 feet anymore. It's cloudy, isn't it? Oh, no, there's a view now. We're somewhere over Europe.
I can see an engine, which is good. Should we just go on the other side and check?
Well, we're in a beautiful new plane.
It is. It is. An Airbus A350.
And as you said, it's got very curly things at the end of the wings, very pretty, with a British flag on them.
And one on the back too. Well, it's not a British flag, it's like a ribbon in red and blue. A bit of white.
Because we're flying
British Airways.
And hence Mark's comment at the start about going home, because whilst Mark and I both live in Israel these days, in case you haven't heard a podcast previously, or in case you're not good with accents, if you did hear a banging noise, that was somebody going into the bathroom just behind us. Both Mark and I are from the United Kingdom.
And David never likes to admit it, but like me, was born in London.
I was, but my parents had the good sense to move to Manchester when I was 18 months old. However, British Airways flies into London Heathrow, so that's where we're headed for this podcast.
We've been here for a couple of hours.
Well, we haven't been here because we're
not here.
Moving.
I mean, if we stood by the toilets for a couple of hours, I think the crew would be very upset with us. We've been on the plane for 2 or 3 hours. Mm-hmm. We've found all the buttons in our Club World suite. Apparently, the red one on my door, which says "Do not use except in emergency," is not the lock for my little slidey door that puts me in my own little cabin.
Club World is British Airways business class travel once you're travelling outside of Europe. When we got on board, there was a package of little goodies waiting for us, so we could have socks, a blindfold, some lip balm,
and a pillow and a sheet, all made by the White Company, which is a wonderful home furnishing company in the UK.
Then we were given the menu, and we'd already ahead of time asked for kosher food, for vegetarian food, but on the menu, first of all, most important for Mark, were the cocktails.
Yes, it was 6 o'clock in the morning when I ordered my first gin fizz. Is it a gin fizz? No, a gin zing.
There are cocktails, mocktails, spirits. There's even, for those of you who might be driving the plane, so pilots listen out, they have alcohol-free beer. I think that's the first time I've seen that on board a plane, alcohol-free beer.
I possibly had it from the Middle East.
I would imagine from Muslim countries it's quite likely that it exists, yeah. And then it was a breakfast service.
Yeah, really lovely food.
3 types of salmon.
3 types of salmon, and then what they call was it a baked egg?
A baked egg, yeah.
A baked egg, which was almost like a souffle,
right,
surrounded by shakshuka.
Yep.
Looked lovely.
And aubergine or eggplant in it, and whatever drinks you wanted. More important than this and the very, very excellent entertainment system with multiple languages, multiple themes, and as Mark said, the entertainment system is very, very easy to navigate. But beyond all of that, I think not just us, but I think everybody on board, at least on Club World, has had a very, very warm welcome from some lovely members of staff.
Yeah, we have been chatting non-stop to the staff.
Poor people, they can't do any work.
I think the cabin crew hopefully are like that with everybody else. And if they're not, then we're sorry, but we've been taking their time. And they've all been very happy to pose in their new uniforms.
Yep, we've got some pics which you will find on the JPost website and across our social media at MarkDavidPod. Before we get on with the rest of the podcast, talking about British Airways and what you could possibly do in London, if you're staying in London or on a stopover, it's time for the quiz question.
Question number 1. But we've only got one question, so definitely question number 1. Where did the first British Airways flight to Israel land?
Ooh, interesting. Answer at the end of the pod.
Israel is the startup nation, the scale-up nation, the unicorn country. Join me, Maayan Hoffman, Jerusalem Post Deputy CEO, Strategy and Innovation.
And me, Zachy Hennessy, the J-Post Business and Tech and Innovation Correspondent, for our analysis of the most critical Israeli tech innovations today.
In each episode of Inside Israeli Innovation, we'll highlight a new tech trend, discuss the latest innovation news, and interview at least one of Israel's most promising companies.
So if you'd like to know what's on the cutting edge, then this Jerusalem Post show is for you.
Listen to Inside Israeli Innovation on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the train to Shenfield via Stratford. Next station, Hayes and Harlington.
So as you can tell, Mark and I have just got on the underground, the tube, a train into London. We'll tell you a little bit more about the line that we're travelling on in a minute. But first, we wanted to tell you a little bit about what's coming up in the rest of the podcast, and also a little bit about things that you can do in this part of the world. Mark, apart from our guests from British Airways, who else have we got on the pod?
We have a London tour guide who is going to tell us the best things to do in 24 hours, 48 hours, a week in London.
But if you haven't got that length of time, say you're on I know you've got an 8-10 hour layover, what can you do? And we've already experienced this, so share maybe with the listeners what we got up to this morning, early afternoon.
For an 8-10 hour layover, what we're doing is shopping. We're filling our suitcases with the best of British shopping. We went 4 stops from Heathrow Airport. We went to a place called Hounslow. 5 minutes outside the station is a shopping centre with a supermarket, with a town centre, with all the brands that people know from the UK, like Marks and Spencer's, Next, Boots, and supermarkets like Asda, and even cheaper supermarkets like B&M.
We did all of our purchases, our gifts, so if again you're in transit, that's something that's very easy to do. If you've got 6 to 8 hours, you could try to get downtown. If you've got, say, 10 to 12 hours, you most certainly can do it. So when we got back from our little shopping spree in Hounslow, we went to our rooms, checked in the hotel that we're staying in Terminal 5, which is where many of the flights come in and out, particularly those of British Airways. So we're staying in the Sofitel. We've dumped everything there, and now we're heading into town.
Yes, we're on the Elizabeth line. This is the brand new London Underground line, except it's a bit more than that. It goes all the way from Reading in the west to Shenfield in the east. It was originally called the Crossrail Project. They started building it in 2009, and it was finally open for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in 2022 at the minor expenditure of $18 billion. The Queen herself, who wasn't actually due to be there, made an appearance at the opening in May 2022. Sadly, a few months later, she passed away, but this is a lasting tribute to her, and the Elizabeth line is the quickest way into London using the Underground.
Just to describe, it's beautifully clean, as opposed to those of you familiar with the Tube or the Underground in London, where each carriage is closed off from the next one. Here it really is open. You can walk all the way through the train. It's very airy, it's very light. People face one another, which is the case in many trains on the Underground. We're going to get back to you in a little while from downtown London, but first it's time to hear from another guest.
We're going to learn about the history of British Airways flying to Israel. I don't want to go too far into it because we'll leave that to our guest Jim. Jim Davis is the BA historian. He works at something called the Speedbird Centre. I think it's also known as the Heritage Collection. We'll find out a bit more, so let's hear from Jim now.
It's my privilege to be one of the curators here in the British Airways Speedbird Centre, here at Waterside in the airline's head office. I joined the airline, amazing, I can't believe now, so long ago, in December 1966, when it was BOAC, British Airways Corporation. and finally took a deal, early retirement in 2002, I think it was. Can't believe it, time's gone so fast. 2002, and I didn't know what to do because I was merely a young man then. I caught up with the late Paul Jarvis, who ran the museum, and that was 20 years ago. And I've been working harder than ever since, really. It's been a great privilege to do this curating and looking after our history. It's included, for example, doing a lot of fashion shows abroad, because when there's a new uniform, a new route, they like to have a fashion show on a catwalk. We've done 2 in Tel Aviv. What a privilege.
As we were walking into this wonderful building and we were being told about the Queen's visit in 2019, I believe she came to the Heritage Centre.
Yeah, the date actually is locked in my mind, 23rd of May 2019. And amazingly, I was given the privilege of being asked to show her around the museum here, which was incredible. And she was in good form. She laughed at my joke. Always a good thought, really. And she was interested. We had a lot of material on display relating to travels during her reign, because on many occasions she and the Prince would have flown on British Airways or BOC or BEA. It was a tremendous visit. And also we had some staff here wearing old uniforms. And I just love the fact they chose 10 staff. It was a thank you to them, because each individual had done a lot of fundraising. And it was a great opportunity for the Queen to say thank you for the money they'd raised for whatever the charity they were doing.
It's a beautiful centre. It's not overly large, but there is so much to see. You could spend hours in here, and it's beautifully curated. I'll ask the question in 2 different ways, and you can choose which way you want to answer it. Why on earth do you need a heritage centre? Or the other version of the question, how much do people love to wallow in sentimentality when they come in here?
They always say, to know where you are today, you need to look where you've come from. And I think when people, either external visitors or new staff, or wander around here, they realise it isn't just a flight today or a flight tomorrow or a new aircraft. It's a history. It's a story that goes back 100 years of development and an expertise and technical achievement with these wonderful engineers who developed these aircraft from one passenger aircraft back in 1919, and today, of course, you have a 380 carrying 470. So it's a progress and change in the face of, and I'm sure our colleagues agree, intense competition.
While we've been walking around the Heritage Centre, anniversaries seem to play large. This is the 65th anniversary of X, but next year there are 2 enormous anniversaries for British Airways. Can you tell us about those?
1st of April 1974 was when the 2 state corporations, BEA, British European Airways, and BOAC, were merged. After a lot of discussion within the government, they decided to have one big airline operating under a single flight prefix, serving the world, was better than duplication across 2 airlines, 2 engineering bases, 2 fleets. And so the government decided to create British Airways as a single entity. That, of course, sounds very simple, but it took a long time, over quite a number of years, for the various bits to come together. Now, I work for BOAC, and proudly so. So whenever I see a BEA person, I say, well, we took BEA over, which always winds up a BEA person, you can be sure of that.
I did notice, actually, in the very dark back storeroom that you've got, that you still have a BOAC shoulder bag there.
And isn't it wonderful to see? Just to remind our BEA colleagues who the senior airline were. And of course the other anniversary is 1 April 1924, is when the British government decided that they needed a British state carrier to compete with the French and the Germans and the Dutch on routes across to the east. Far too far to get to the States. But so they created this wonderful airline called Imperial Airways, with that mission to link the King's possessions around the world. As you say, it's great to have a double anniversary. I must tell people upstairs how we must celebrate that when it comes to it, really. Perhaps have the King here, I don't know.
Last week, British Airways had the new uniform that was designed by Oswald Boateng, and the Heritage Centre has a collection of some of the older uniforms. Do you have a favourite uniform?
I do, actually, quite apart from the new one today, and it's actually unexpected one. It's actually a very lovely navy blue, and it was used by BOAC from after World War II onwards. It didn't change much, they just gradually embellished it with brass buttons and rank badges and belts and stuff. So that's my favourite, because it's actually very traditional, and it kept really up till 1974 after the merger, when they started to put a uniform in. But I think it's a very classy uniform, and that's exactly the point, because a lot of the uniforms are by distinguished designers, Hartnell, Oswald Boateng, Julian MacDonald. They all play their part in the story. Of course, we have a formality of a Japanese kimono, because Japanese cabin crew used to wear kimono on the flights for about 20 years or so. And wonderfully for our visitors, they're always intrigued by right next to the kimono, which is a very formal thing there's a paper dress worn by cabin crews. I'm never sure they like them very much when flying from New York down to the Caribbean in 1967. Nowadays, of course, we go Gatwick Caribbean non-stop. But in those days, they went via New York. So for that New York Caribbean sector, they put on this paper dress. Like it all over Marmite, I don't know. Wonderfully, in fact, there's horrible green shoes that don't suit me at all. And there's also a flower in the hair, which is actually rather special as well.
So you've talked a lot about the history, the heritage, and clearly, despite my cynicism in my question earlier, obviously the future is completely built on the past. How are you representing the present, particularly in terms of people who are flying between Tel Aviv and London, or Tel Aviv and North America, for example?
Well, the answer is that, as well as our historical displays here, one of the purposes of the Heritage Centre, of course, is to show current onboard product. And here we have the 4 cabins first: Club World, World Traveller Plus and World Traveller. In terms of the aircraft, of course, we are showing the 350, the Airbus A350-1000, which is currently in use on the route, which I think you came over on. And so we're showing, the general product and how hopefully we're going forward, while looking back, because this month, 20 years ago, Concorde retired. I see that Concorde came to Tel Aviv actually on a charter flight, never a scheduled flight, but it did visit. So that part is so rich, and which I think hopefully our visitors here enjoy seeing.
You mentioned visitors here, and David and I have been talking about what to do on a stopover in London. If people have time, can they just rock up at the centre, or do they need to book an appointment? Is it open to the public?
Very much open to the public, and we're delighted to welcome people rocking up. What we generally ask them to do, and we get a lot of inquiries by email, and we ask them in fact to make an appointment. We're open Monday to Thursday, not Friday, Saturday, Sunday, except on very special occasions. So we ask them to make an appointment so that we can issue visitor passes up at the reception, and they can come in and enjoy looking round. Sometimes we get big groups in 20s, 30s come in. They have a sit-down presentation, but they're very welcome, and we suggest to make a booking just for convenience sake. Our email address here is very appropriate: ba.1.museum@ba.com. And we have a website, ba.com/heritage. There's a lot to see on there as well, because in addition to the actual museum, we sell posters and books and postcards and little souvenirs which people love to take home, especially the posters. And of course those posters, what a story in their own right. That's huge and beautifully artistic. These posters which people love to put in their front rooms and all that.
Not many people retire and then beg to come back to work. There's clearly something, a bug that you've got for flight, for British Airways, and obviously for BOAC. What is it? What makes you come back here every single day?
I suppose it's a sheer pleasure of doing this role. It's a busy role. I'm working harder now than when I was paid, but it's fascinating and it's very fulfilling. We meet some tremendous people, visitors here. Yesterday we had a pilot who was absolutely fascinating and spent about 2 hours here. It was some wonderful people, cabin crew. It's meeting and sharing. I think that's the privilege behind it, which what drives one on really, along with one's wonderful colleagues here.
This is Mark Gordon from the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod, or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com. We've emerged from the hustle and bustle of the underground, and we're now on Oxford Street. This is the main shopping street in the West End. We're on a very, very interesting corner. Behind me is Selfridges, the historic, more than 100-year-old department store. In front of me is Marks & Spencer's, a very well-known brand name. There is a really, really interesting new glass building which houses Pandora, Zara, Bershka, all of those Spanish retail names. And behind David is a man playing wonderful music.
Yeah, busking in the old days would be a couple of the pearly kings and queens or people like that from the East End of London strutting their stuff and singing local London songs, but we've moved international. So if you do have time in your visit to London, if you're here for a good few days or just 24 hours, We're going to introduce you now to the man who has all the answers to your questions. Where you should go, maybe what you should eat. Also, quite a bit about the Jewish scene, tourist-wise, here in London.
His name is Jonathan Cohen. He is a licensed London tour guide. Let's hear from Jonathan.
I was born in a place called Macclesfield.
No.
I doubt that any one of your listeners is going to know where on the planet Macclesfield is. It is the smallest little town just outside of Manchester. And funnily enough, I spent my first 16 years in Macclesfield and then emigrated to a place that you might be familiar with also, and that's a place called Israel. So I spent my 1980s in Israel doing the usual things, but for whatever reason I ended up back in London in the 1990s, where I've been working ever since, and I've been a tour guide in London, an official accredited blue badge tour guide in London since 2018.
My sister lived about 5 minutes north of Macclesfield in Poynton.
I went to school in Poynton. What a small world it is.
Jewish geography in Macclesfield. Are you the only Oleh from Macclesfield to Israel? I'm wondering that now.
In some ways, yeah, but actually there's two of us because my sister subsequently made Aliyah as well. Out of the 5 Jews in Macclesfield, 2 of them made Aliyah. I'm sure the Jewish Agency would love those statistics. I must tell you that I'm convinced that my grandparents emigrated there because they saw the signs, they saw the M, they saw the A, and they thought, here, we're in Manchester.
And back to the podcast. London's a hugely popular destination, of course, for our listeners, both in terms of tourism and as far as British Airways is concerned. Obviously, it's a great hub for flying around the world, for seeing Europe, for going from the US to Israel and stopping off for a visit to London. If somebody's visiting for the first time and they're getting out at Heathrow or one of the other myriad airports in the capital, where should they go? First-time visitors.
It is important to also point out that it's not just a hub for British Airways. It is the hub for British Airways. So massively important destination, not just for the airline, but for the whole world. Everybody comes to London. The problem with the question is that there's way too many answers. I literally could spend the next hour or so giving you the highlight.
That's not the problem with the question. That's the problem with your answer.
No, fair comment. Good point. Thank you.
You've got 10 seconds starting now.
Most people tend to, when they think about London, they think about 2 specific cities. One called the City of Westminster, one called the City of London. Most things are in that area. When you look at the City of London is where the money is made. The City of Westminster is where it's spent, because that's where the royal family are located. So most people tend to focus on a first-time visit. They will visit things like the Palace of Westminster, aka the Houses of Parliament, with that famous tower that most people recognise under the name of Big Ben. They'll look at Westminster Abbey, Whitehall, Buckingham Palace, and also the most important palace in England, which, funnily enough, isn't actually Buckingham Palace at all. But they will go to that area. The City of Westminster is the new part of town. That's been around for about 1,000 years. When they finish there, they'll go to the old part of town, the 2,000-year-old City of London, that includes things like St Paul's Cathedral, the Tower of London, and those are absolutely the must-visit places when you think about coming to London for the first time.
All 3 of us have lived in London at some point in our life. If you know London reasonably well, are there some hidden gems or some new attractions to go to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think,
Thank you.
Look, London hasn't changed a huge amount, but people discover new areas. I take a lot of Londoners around London, and they're like, do you know, I've never, ever been here before. There's a lot of things, and certainly from a second or third time visitor, you could be a 10th time visitor and still not scratch the surface. I like Wapping.
Just want to check, Wapping is the name of a place rather than an activity, right?
That's whipping. That's Westminster again.
The activity is an optional extra. The location, however, is free for all. Name of a destination. It's an area towards the east of London. It's where the old docks used to be. But some of the pubs there date back to the 16th century. It's got massive amounts of entertainment value for visitors. Greenwich Greenwich is another one that very, very few people head out to, but everybody in the world has heard of something called Greenwich Mean Time. So Greenwich is a massively important attraction, not just because of the mean time, but also because there's so many different things to see in the area. It's got, again, an amazing historical connection to the city. Henry VIII was born there. There's lots of different activities. And interestingly enough, from an Israeli point of view, the National Maritime Museum is sponsored by the Offer family. It's great fun for kids, but as an Israeli point of view, it's quite a nice little context, a nice little point. Final place is a location really, really bang in the centre of London, but again, nobody ever talks about it. It's an area called Southwark. Famously, it's got a train station there, the London Bridge railway station. The way I describe Southwark is that most people are familiar with what's been happening in Las Vegas since the 1940s. Well, Southwark has been doing the same thing since the 1490s. It's got an incredible maritime history. It's got an incredible... Anything that couldn't and wasn't allowed to take place in the City of London had to move out of the boundaries. So any activities that perhaps weren't perceived by the local authorities as being upholding and decent took place outside the city, and a lot of them moved to Southwark. So, for example, William Shakespeare, or Billy the Sheik, created his first theatre there in 1599 because he wasn't allowed in the City of London. So, great place to visit, again, if you've happened to have done all the main highlights.
London's got a large Jewish population. There's probably somewhere between 250,000 and 300,000 Jews there. How far back does the Jewish history of London go?
The answer to that is on the record since 1066, off the record, and anecdotally, you could say right the way back to the Roman conquest. The Romans took slaves from Jerusalem back to Rome, and they used those slaves in further subsequent invasions that they carried out. So although there's no hard archaeological evidence to prove it, it's very, very likely that there was Jewish London way back to the Roman times. But in terms of concrete, we know that William the Conqueror, William the First, and he's got a lot of other names as well, brought over a large Jewish population with him when he invaded in 1066 in the Norman Conquest. But there's also been a number of sort of, if you like, migration points. So the Jews were expelled in the year 1219, were readmitted in the 1650s. So we got another wave, if you like, in the 1650s. And then, of course, a more modern, more recent migration that sees a lot of refugees or immigrants coming over from the East Europe, Russia, the Pale settlement, etc., in the late 19th century.
So if you're doing a tour of Jewish London, where do you take customers without obviously giving away all the secrets of your tour?
Oh, wow, I love giving away secrets. That's part of the fun. That's what we do. The classic tour for the Jewish population is basically something known as the East End of London. It's where the majority of Jews moved to in the 19th century, in the latter part of the 19th century, places like Brick Lane, Princelet Street, Fournier Street. All these locations are tiny little streets where the Jewish community, being quite a poor community, emigrated to in the 19th century. I have a number of other tours that I do for specifically with the Jewish community in mind. I operate something called Kosher Kingdoms, which is actually a West End tour, touring the mansions and the places associated with some of the very, very wealthy Jews that lived in, the families like the Rothschild families, for example. There's also another tour that I do called Gelt and Gills, which focuses on pretty much the city of London and charting the course of Jewish life through the various different financial institutions, the guild halls, the Lord Mayor of London, etc., seen from a Jewish perspective. Interestingly enough, both St. Paul's Cathedral and the Tower of London both have extremely interesting Jewish stories to them. So I take a number of visitors to those two places and look at it from a Jewish perspective. And the one that most people like is a tour called Jewish or Jew-ish, which is a focus on the residences of some people that perhaps surprise you when you tell them that they are actually Jewish. Bob Marley, for example, being one of the classic examples. Wow, who knew that he was actually Jewish? Well, of course he's not, but he's Jew-ish because his father was a Syrian Jew. So there's a whole range of things actually you can do with Jewish visitors to London. Great place to come for it.
So Bloom's is no more. Rubens went and is back again. But in terms of, and these are well-known kosher restaurants sort of more in the heart of London. But today, with the exception of Rubens, do you have to go out to Golders Green or Hendon, or can you stay in the centre of the city and still eat kosher?
Jewish life in London has moved north, as you say, to some of the northern suburbs. And of course, in those northern suburbs, there's a lot of kosher restaurants to choose from. There's a small and limited number of strictly kosher restaurants. Israeli cuisine is doing quite well in London. So there's a number of Israeli places, but they're not necessarily kosher. But if you're looking at kosher, apart, of course, from Rubens on Baker Street, then the Island Grill is an option. That's on Lancaster Terrace. It's one of London's most famous kosher caterers who's ventured into the restaurant business. There's a small chain called Baladi. They've got a couple of restaurants in North London, but they also have one restaurant in Leather Lane, just by Hatton Gardens, actually, and that's kosher. And there's a relatively newcomer on Grosvenor Terrace in the centre of the West End. The place is known as Macollet. It's more sort of shop and sandwiches rather than a proper sit-down restaurant. But again, it's another kosher option in the West End. Regrettably, there aren't many more than that I can think of.
When I go back to England, I take a suitcase with me. I try and buy the things I can't get in Israel. Where are the best places to go shopping in London and fill that suitcase?
Oh, Primark. When I guide with Israelis, 2,000 years worth of history is pretty much not the most important thing they're looking for. Primark does tend to be one of the most important attractions. Let's say your budgetary range might be, if you're looking for something to impress the wife or girlfriend or partner, then certainly Knightsbridge, Regent Street, Beauchamp Place, Sloane Street, these kind of places, jokingly, they always refer to the fact that it takes a man 45 minutes to walk down Sloane Street and a lady in about 4.5 hours. But if the luxury end is what you're looking for, that's kind of where you go. Mid-range, Oxford Street, Soho, Covent Garden, that kind of a vibe. So very much in the centre of town, but that's where most of the larger department stores are located. And I guess the other thing is souvenirs. People love souvenir shopping as well when they come here. And of course, that's an option. Camden Market, Portobello Road. Greenwich is also good for souvenirs. And the best souvenirs or the best cheap range shopping in London, charity shops. The charity shops, particularly in Knightsbridge and the West End, you can pick up some incredible clothing at very, very good prices.
One word answer, I'm afraid. If people have time for one show that's on at the moment, what's your recommendation?
Hamilton.
Cool. Let's move on. If people want to know how they can get hold of you, how they can take your tour, what's the best way to be in touch?
Oh, what a great idea. Thank you. MyLondonTourGuide.com.
MyLondonTourGuide.com. It's as easy as that. Jonathan Cohen, thank you so very much for your time and for making us laugh.
British Airways London Fact File. British Airways flies directly between Tel Aviv and London twice daily. From London, British Airways customers have access to one of the world's most extensive flight networks, both domestically and internationally, operating out of 3 major London airports: London Heathrow, London Gatwick and London City. They serve 27 destinations in the US alone. In total, British Airways flies to around 200 destinations in some 74 countries, operating more than 250 aircraft. The quickest method to get from Terminal 5 to central London is via the Heathrow Express to Paddington Station. It takes around 20 minutes. London Underground trains will take you to the heart of the West End. The brand new Elizabeth line will get you to Tottenham Court Road in 38 minutes, and the Piccadilly line will bring you to Leicester Square in 53 minutes. $100 will buy you 82 British pounds as of September 2023. London has mild winters and temperate summers. Average daytime temperature is 42 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius in January, and 65 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 degrees Celsius in July. The sun shines on most days, but an umbrella is recommended all year round. The 50 best hotel list says the Savoy, Nomad, Connaught and Claridge's are London's best hotels. Inside Terminal 5, there's the Sofitel Hotel. The Marriott London Park Lane offers a daily kosher buffet, as does the Holiday Inn Express Golders Green, which reopens in 2024. Both have Shabbat-friendly rooms. For other kosher and kosher-friendly hotels, check the internet. London has a remarkable 74 Michelin-starred restaurants, including 5 with 3 Michelin stars. There's a plethora of vegetarian restaurants, including Govinda's near Soho Square. For kosher food in central London, old traditional favourites Rubin's is joined by Baladi in the City of London and Tony Page's Island Grill at the Royal Lancaster Hotel. For a wider choice, head up the Northern Line to Finchley, Hendon, Golders Green and Edgware. Hello, David.
Hello again, Mark.
I think one of the advantages of having effectively your own terminal is you get to put your stamp on it. You get to say, this is how I would like to design the check-in process. This is how I'd like to design what happens to first-class customers, business-class customers. And British Airways have that freedom, I think, here at Heathrow. We are very lucky and very privileged to be in the Concorde room, which is the first-class lounge.
We're in Terminal 5, which is, if you're flying to Tel Aviv, you will be coming through Terminal 5. And we haven't yet sampled the club lounges. The business lounges, will be doing that a little bit later on. But when you come in, if you are travelling first class, you're siphoned off through a separate check-in area. Obviously, the lines are much shorter, the security lines are much shorter. And you come to the first class lounge where there are a variety of meals on offer. As we came through a short while ago, there was both breakfast and lunch menu, which was really a buffet. One of the many differences between that and the Concorde area is that here it's an a la carte menu and it is waiter service.
The lounge also has a very high-end wine menu.
You would notice that, wouldn't you?
I would, and I'm very happy to be facing the bar and looking at the multiple gins, the multiple vodkas, the multiple whiskies that are on offer, as well as tequila, Bacardi, Campari. There's a full range here. You can sit and relax. The atmosphere here is very quiet, so we are talking quietly so as not to be thrown over the balcony. And if you want to go and sit out on a balcony, you can watch through the big glass windows of the terminal. You can see all the planes.
You've got a 270-degree angle looking out at the planes. You've got all types of consumers from all across the world with very different financial means. Mark and I, through this trip, predominantly are looking at the club world, which is the business offering from British. If you're travelling through London to Tel Aviv, or from Tel Aviv to London, or onwards to North America or to other destinations. So we wanted to find out a little bit more about that offering. So what we're about to do after we finish our latest drink is head over to Waterside and British Airways headquarters for a very special meeting.
We're going to have a chat with British Airways Chief Customer Officer Callum Lamming and find out about the ethos of the customer experience. Firstly, Callum will tell us a little bit about himself.
Been in airlines for just under 30 years, actually. Been doing this quite a while. I started when I was at school in a call centre and then paid my way through university working for airlines, in particular Go, which was BA's original low-cost airline. And I was the purser on the very last Go flight. That was during university. I also worked, whilst I was working at Procter & Gamble, I had a very classic marketing training. And then after I left P&G, I decided that aviation was for me in the marketing and product space as it was back then. Having worked so many years in airports and call centres and on board the aircraft, it seemed natural to kind of combine it with what I was doing. And yeah, I've been really lucky. I've had a great career. I've worked around the world. I've worked as far afield as the Middle East, New Zealand, Nigeria, the Caribbean. And joined British Airways just under 18 months ago, actually, in April last year. Before that, I was with Vueling, which is also part of the IAG group. I was the Chief Customer Officer at Vueling for 5.5 years before I came here, so all the way through the pandemic. So that's pretty much who I am.
What is a Chief Customer Officer?
It is the representation of our customers in the airline. It's a team, actually. I'm really lucky. We're a team of just under 20,000 here in British Airways, in the team we call Customer and Brand. We kind of look after the end-to-end customer journey. So everything from all the touch points on the ground to the air. We look after research and insight, because it's key to know what our colleagues and our customers want and think, and how they're appreciating what we do. We look after catering, lounges, the in-flight entertainment. We also have marketing and brand in the team, and of course our colleagues in customer care, so all our call centres and customer relations teams around the world, and crucially our cabin crew, which make up about 18,000 of the team.
If you're in Tel Aviv at the airport Ben Gurion and you look at the departures board, there are so many companies now flying this route into London. Why should they fly with British Airways?
You're right, we are in a fiercely competitive industry, and that's what we love. Why would you fly British Airways? Because we are uniquely who we are. We have a great service. We have a long history, particularly on the Tel Aviv route, many years of operating in and out. We, most of the year, offer double daily services to Tel Aviv and great connections as well. We have great products. We put a lot of investment in. But truly, if you ask, it's the experience, and the experience is the product, is the seats and the entertainment and the food that we serve on board, but it's all about our people. As I said, I've done this job for quite a while. I am so convinced that British Airways has this uniquely set of brilliant individuals who really bring the experience to life in a way that is only us, no other airline could imitate. And that's the experience that we are proud to offer to Tel Aviv, to the US. In fact, we fly to all 6 continents of the world. So we're proud to take the British flag as well, globally, and fly that flag. It's an honour, it's something we're very proud of, and it's a responsibility for us too.
David and I were lucky enough to fly in one of the Club World cabins on the Airbus A350 from Tel Aviv to London, but the experience isn't just about on board if you're flying Club World. Tell us about the experience from start to finish on the ground, lounges.
You're quite right, it's an end-to-end customer journey. It's not just about the flight. I'm very conscious that the flight is the bit every one of our customers actually purchases, but everything else is so vital. We put a lot of time and thought into it. One of the big changes that's happened in recent years and becoming even more important, of course, the digital experience. That makes up a lot of the ground experience. We're currently going through a redesign of our digital offering, be that through the sales and servicing part of the journey, through to, we've just launched a digital wayfinding tool, for example, at Heathrow to help our customers through there. The other part is making sure that we're represented at check-in to our standards across the globe, how we offer the dedicated check-ins for on routes with first class, first class, Club World or Club Europe if you're flying within Europe, World Traveller Plus, we have dedicated check-in for long haul, and of course World Traveller or Euro Traveller for those cabins. And a lot is about lounges, particularly for the premium customers that you mentioned. We still have a lot of lounges around the world. We have 30 different lounges in 23 locations, because we have quite a lot of Heathrow. We operate across 2 terminals and satellite buildings, and the different cabins have different lounges. We put a lot of investment, particularly at the moment, we're putting a lot of investment in. We've just completely refreshed Terminal 3 lounge here at Heathrow. We are just refreshing the Terminal 5B satellite lounge, which I hope you get to visit before you leave. The full refurb should be finished within the next couple of weeks. A lot of it's already done, so you'll be able to see some of the features. For example, the Whispering Angel bar that we've launched there, because a lot's about working with partners as well to bring this experience to life. Going forward, we've got refreshes this year alone coming in our Milan Lounge, Edinburgh Lounge, Seattle Lounge. We opened the JFK Lounge with our partner American Airlines, the brand new ones in Terminal 8 when we made the move last December. There's a lot of investment going in there, particularly as we emerged from the pandemic, which was such a challenging time for the world, and our industry was definitely suffered as the world closed down, and we've had to rebuild. We've been able to refocus on exactly what our customers want by using that research and insight from our customers and our colleagues, crucially, because they're the ones that tell us what's happening, each and every day. We can use that to really shape the experience. And actually, things have changed post-pandemic. The types of customers, we have more leisure customers than business customers before. That means how people consume, how people enjoy, how people travel. They stay in lounges longer because they get to the airport earlier than they ever did before. A traditional flight from New York overnight, which can be under 6 hours, or Boston. Before the pandemic, the majority of customers just wanted to go to sleep. Now customers want to eat as well, and that's absolutely fine. So we have a duty and a responsibility to do it, and it's something we take very seriously. We adapt and change. quite quickly.
How do you make airline food for that many customers stand out? How do you make it tasty, nutritious? And for Club World and First, how do you make that higher quality product?
We work with experts around the world. As an airline, we're not culinary experts, so we partner with culinary experts who do that work for us. We do have a group of very talented chefs here in the team, in customer and brand, who work with our partners and our catering suppliers around the world. It's about utilising fresh ingredients. You have to look at bringing the Britishness to life. You know, we are all about being British Airways, so you have to make sure we highlight that. But at the same time, we're British Airways. We fly around the world. We don't want to make it just, you know, British food. You're not going to get the freshest British ingredients on the other side of the world. You need to work with local provenance. And we have set standards, as in 4 starters in first class, and we have choices of 3 in economy class. They're kind of the standards, or what we call World Traveller. But then we partner with the experts down route to say what works for our customers, what works for time of day. When you fly, for example, out of London to Singapore, you leave 9 o'clock in the evening, you land at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Do customers want breakfast, brunch, or lunch when they land? You know, you've got a lot of those challenges. With that, that's one of the things where we have been agile and been changing according to customer feedback over recent times. But it's not just about the food. You've got to have a good drinks offering alongside it as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellie.
And I'm Brooke. We're British Airways cabin crew.
And you're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast Travel Edition.
Since last year, we've very much been working towards our new brand platform, which is a British Original, which you're starting to see come to life. So you'll have seen it, for example, in the British Original advertising campaign that we launched in October, which we are so proud won a Cannes Lion Grand Prix just a few months ago, which shows it's really resonated. We've brought that across the customer experience. You see it on the onboard entertainment. You saw our safety video, I think.
The safety video is fantastic. Today, entertainment on the airplane is a different world. And I have to say, Mark said when we were flying yesterday that the beauty of the British Airways system was the categorization of what's on the screen in front of you. He thought it was far more in-depth and much better ways of selecting than some of the other airlines that we've flown on.
Well, thank you for saying that. We've certainly put a lot of work into that. It was really important to design not only the content, so you see loads more box sets now because we're much more about box sets and full series. It's about how we used to consuming media at home, and this has to be an extension of that. So we've done a lot with content. We've actually, this summer, we've doubled the amount of content that we had versus last year. We did a partnership with Paramount Plus at the end of last year, which we launched, which has been incredibly popular and now makes up 1/3 of all the viewing that we have on board. It's also about the system. So if you're flying the A350, you've got our brand new system, which also has the user interface, which swipes, which is much more what we're akin to doing now with smartphones and iPads. And of course, you have to think about all of those. So the entertainment experience is immersive. But entertainment's not just what we have loaded on board our long-haul aircraft, of course. We have Wi-Fi across most of the fleet, and we're just progressively rolling out across all the fleet, which is capable of doing streaming.
We're here at a very apt time. Last week was the launch of the new British Airways uniform. What was the thinking behind the new uniform?
The previous uniform was iconic and successful, but it was 19 years old, so nearly 20 years old. Fashion has also changed an awful lot. Wearability, usability, individuality and choice in clothing has been really important. So it was important for us to partner with an expert again. As I think you're probably getting a theme as you talk to me that, you know, we rely on working with these expert collaborators, partners, suppliers in whichever form. And Oswald Boateng was that for us in uniforms. You know, we are a premium brand, and we're proudly a premium brand. We wear suits and ties, we offer choice, but who better to make a suit than an award-winning master tailor who represents the best of Britishness? So a lot went into that in terms of wearability, in terms of sustainability, you know, using recycled polyester, working with a Better Cotton initiative. All of these things were super important. Offering different cuts of trousers for our gentlemen colleagues, so you have slim fit versus straight cut, which is, you know, important to many people. Many different options for our female colleagues to wear, from trousers to skirt, the iconic jumpsuit and the dress, which we hadn't had before in the previous thing. And it was about listening to our colleagues and showing an investment and how proud we are. It allows our colleagues to come to work every day, you know, standing a little bit taller, standing even prouder because they're proud of the uniform they wear, the representation of the British Airways brand that they really carry for us, for our customers. And ultimately that translates into a better experience and service for our customers.
Where are you today? What encapsulates British Airways, what's your ethos?
Our ethos is actually based around, at the moment, as we grow and develop and come out of the situation that we've been in the world and in the industry with the pandemic, and you've heard me say it before, we are proudly a British original, and that's who we are, and that's what we represent. We recognise that it's a new and modern world, and how people travel and how people consume and how people spend their money and their time and where they work from has changed massively in the time. And I think that's really, really important. So that a British original platform allows us to be BA, allows our colleagues to be themselves. We also recognise the original reasons every one of our customers gets on board our aircraft, which is also key. It's about growing and developing, proudly flying that flag, proudly holding the name we hold, but also proud of where we've come from. I mean, if you notice in the safety video, when our cabin crew colleagues, Seema from the first version and Jason from the second version, ask little Sims to pay attention, as she takes the headphone off, she was listening to the Flower Duet, which is that song from the 80s that you could actually sing, because we're super proud of where we came from. We're a 104-year-old brand, proudly flying to all 6 continents, inhabited continents of the world, and really wanting to bring that to life. That will never change, but we need to modernise, grow, develop. It's about transformation for us. We're under a very comprehensive, very exciting transformation programme across the airline. It's got to encapsulate where we are in the world, be that the focus on sustainability, which is a very key one for us as we're working to make sure we work on that, offering the best experience for our colleagues as part of the airline and bringing the airline to life, and constantly evolving the customer experience. And where we are at the moment is we're completely on a journey together as a 37,000 strong global colleague workforce of creating for us, and most importantly for customers, what we call a better BA.
Where can listeners find out more about British Airways and book tickets?
Well, definitely please book tickets. And it's, well, all the social platforms will have it, everything from Twitter, X, Instagram. You'll find lots of information on LinkedIn, but of course everything is available on our website. Very easy, ba.com.
Callum Lamming, thank you so much indeed for your time and for your passion.
Thank you so very much for coming to visit. Enjoy your flight back.
At the start of this podcast, you may have heard the announcement welcoming people on board this beautiful plane as we set sail from Tel Aviv to London Heathrow. That announcement was made by Shane, and Shane is with Mark and myself now.
Hello, good afternoon.
How long have you been with British Airways, and what made you become cabin crew?
With British Airways, I've been working about 5 years now. My wonderful aunt from Israel, she worked 20 odd years for El Al, Israel's airline. And I think my inspiration for joining flying, because I remember in the days when we were still allowed into the flight deck, coming up and visiting, seeing the pilots up the front, and I think that's where the bug and the fire inside of me has been lit.
How did that develop from getting the bug, going through the training and all those types of things, to where you are today?
So I was lucky enough to live in Israel for a few years before joining BA. Having moved back to the UK, it was my opportunity to be able to see the world, but equally have the opportunity to come back and see my family and friends in Israel regularly, and BA gives me the opportunity to do that.
So is this your favourite route, or do you have another that you always look on the roster and go, I'd love to go there?
How did you guys guess? My favourite route. I might be a little bit biased. I do like to get around and travel. I'm hoping for next month to go to Chile for the first time, so we will see.
You speak Hebrew. How important is that for this company and for the passengers when you're on the Tel Aviv route?
I'm very lucky that I had the opportunity to learn Hebrew and that I can share it with our passengers on board. There are only a few of us that speak Hebrew in the company, but we do notice the difference with the passengers when we are able to have that extra bit of communication with them, that extra connection. It helps make the flights much calmer. Everybody is just ready for their holidays, their travels, their business. Makes a big difference.
You're decked out in a lovely new uniform, which I believe only came out last week. How do you feel about it?
It's always exciting to be in something fresh and new, and we're hoping that we can wear it proudly for the next few years to come at least.
Looking forward, from your perspective, where do you see yourself going? Is this something where you see yourself retiring in this job? Is being a flight attendant something that you can do for 40 years as a profession, as perhaps your aunt did with Alal?
Well, I'll have to consult my knees first if they'll allow me to do the 40 years, but I'm very much hoping to be in this for the foreseeable future. I do want to progress, and it gives me great opportunities in this company in all manner of directions to be able to do it.
Do you have something that really makes you smile when you do this job? Is there one particular aspect that you really enjoy, or something that customers do that really makes you smile?
Every crew member brings their own little bit of something special to the job. I enjoy making it smooth for the rest of the crew. So 99% of the time I'll be in one of the kitchens, and my job is to make everything flow to keep our passengers happy. And if I can do that, then I'm happy.
Shane, thank you so much for agreeing to do the interview, because you didn't know about it before, and thank you for keeping us happily entertained and fed.
And mildly tipsy.
Mildly tipsy is always good. You need to be hydrated on a long flight. Thank you very much.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod, or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
Oh, David.
I knew that's how you were going to start this segment.
No, but I am in a state of bliss at the moment. I'm in this most comfortable chair with my feet up in the Galleries Club Lounge at Terminal 5, Section B.
We're waiting for our flight back to Tel Aviv. What a better way to do it?
And while I'm looking forward to my flight, I'm not waiting that keenly because I'm quite having fun at Terminal 5.
We need to say thank you, first of all, to several people who you've heard from during this podcast, and also maybe a couple of others who've been working behind the scenes to make it happen.
Thank you to Callum. Thank you to Jim. Thank you to Jonathan, our wonderful tour guide. And thank you to Shane.
So they're all the ones that you heard from. A particular thanks goes to Emily, who made all of this happen from the international PR team at British, and also to Yael in Tel Aviv, who helped along the way.
Oh, I'm still feeling very blissful.
It's been a lot of fun. As we always say, we're very privileged because we get to do all of this special travel and we're looked after. But one of the things that Mark and I have noticed, and we're sure this will also be the case on our return leg, is the attention that British crew members give to every person flying on their jets.
And not just the attention. We have caught British Airways cabin crew on escalators in the middle of the terminal, and we've said hi. We've asked them about uniforms. We've asked them about working with British Airways. Mm-hmm. And one thing they are is absolutely genuine. Everybody will talk to you like a human being. There's no pretense. You just feel very relaxed here.
If you have enjoyed this podcast, well, obviously the word "if" is irrelevant. You have enjoyed this podcast, so please do give us a 5-star rating, follow us or subscribe, depending on which podcast provider you use, and please tell your friends all about the Jerusalem Post podcast Travel Edition.
It's been a real privilege for me to go home, to go to London, and to David's home as well, although he won't admit it because he's London-born. But we have also had the privilege to go around the world, and if you want to hear our travels in various parts of the world, we have another 70-odd podcasts for you to listen to.
You can always message us at MarkDavidPod for social media, and our email address, markdavidpod@gmail.com.
Quiz time?
Please, sir.
The question was, where did the first British Airways flight land in Israel? And actually it wasn't British Airways, it was a predecessor of British Airways called Imperial Airlines. And they landed not in Lod, not at Ben Gurion, but they landed, try and work out the year, I think it was 1932. They landed not even on land. They landed on Lake Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee in a seaplane.
The Kinneret.
In fact, the Kinneret, yes, to give it yet another name.
I assume that the first class and the business class in those days were a little bit different to the way they are these days.
Actually, I was looking at the model of the plane, and within the seating, it was facing each other. It wasn't like standard 3, 3, 3. There was 3 and then 3 people facing. And it was quite a big plane with room for multiple people. It wasn't just 4 people on a little seaplane. So maybe we were going back to that a little bit, because if you look at modern business class nowadays, they're like facing each other, facing at angles. So you never know.
So we have been the guests of British Airways. They don't tell us what to say. None of the people who host us tell us what to say, and we give our pretty honest, frank impression. We've been very impressed. It's been a fantastic 24, 36 hours. We enjoyed London. The air here was so beautiful, and even the 15 minutes of heavy rain was just a pleasure after the summer that we've had in Israel.
David, I want to play a game of I Spy, because we're looking out from the terminal window onto the concourse.
I know where this is going.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with A.
A plane.
No.
Go on.
Airplane.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with A.
A plane.
No.
Another plane.
Yes.
Let's kill this now. This is going to get really annoying. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and join us again soon for our next Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition.
Take care, folks.
Bye-bye.